musically they are heard, but I think in terms of sort of stating their opinions or being opinion makers, I think one of the reasons is that we have never been a collective. People have worked with folk music separately, with classical music separately. It's always been very, very individual journeys. And sometimes to the so individual that they've left out the rest of the arts as well. So for example, a gharana will focus, loyalty to a gharana will be so absolute that any other gharana will be rejected. So I think unless musicians today, and from different forms and genres of music, if we are not going to really, I'm sorry if I'm sounding a bit like a trade union person or something like that, you know, but really speaking, for us to be heard, I think it is necessary for us to meet each other, to know what issues are important to us. I mean, unfortunately, as we were laughing about it yesterday, the only place musicians meet each other are at airports, you know, where you say, hi, where are you off to? And say, I'm singing at that place and that place. And that's
Shubhaji,
it.
at this juncture, may I ask you to say a little bit about the work that you've done in this, because you have done a lot of work to get musicians together, be it the Baja Gaja or what's the festival called, which we did many years ago, I think in Ahmedabad, was it?
That was a discussion that we
yeah,
had.
but it was over 3-4 days.
Yes, we met, 15 musicians met in Ahmedabad, in Gandhi Nagar actually, just to discuss what experimentation in music meant to us. Because the word experimentation really is used in music today in various ways. So if I'm singing a Bandish and Purya Dhanashri and I remove the tanpuras and tablas from it, and I insert a background of keyboards and drums, it's called experimental. But in other parts of the world, this is hardly any great experiment. So Dr. Ashok Ranade, a very important voice in the world of music and scholarship in music, said that we should meet, and rather than present academic papers, each one of us should bring 2 samples of music that we considered experimental and explain to the rest of the group, that's just 15 people, all making music, why we felt it was experimental. And articulating those ideas, explaining what we felt was an experiment in that work, and that needn't have been work that we had done ourselves. I think that was an important exercise and was a space, a very, very important space for me, at least as a student of music, where I met people from other disciplines. Bickram was there, Murad Ali, the sarangi player, was there, Naresh Fernandez, the scholar of jazz in India, was there. And all of us spoke about what we found experimental in 2 tracks that we selected. And I think these spaces for interaction, for getting to know what each other's work is like, what are the issues, what are the impediments, what are the challenges, and what are the strengths that we really are able to enjoy. I think those spaces are very important, and perhaps that might make a difference.
Yes, I totally agree with you.
I'm also, one of the things I wanted to ask was that, of which I don't think like Bollywood bears the blame, but it seems in some ways like a reflection of it, is that there's definitely a certain kind of anti-intellectualism that's crept into cultural life. There's this feeling like nobody used to feel before that if something was difficult or that it should be discarded. Whereas now there's this very much this feeling, whether it's with books, whether it's with music,
well said.
if I don't get it immediately, like, you know, and Bollywood like will definitely sort of celebrate that impulse.
Yeah. Actually, I think what we're trying to say, all of us, is that the Bollywood is not to be blamed. It's not Bollywood. It's a mind space which has crept in, and Bollywood probably endorses that on some level.
The
is that
thing
what you're
I'm
saying?
like, I guess what I'm interested in asking you and Shobhaji, whatever, is the, I mean, I feel like there's an elephant in the room. We could call it English, we could call it modernity, we could call it a certain contact with the West, but something has happened in these last 50 years that has affected literature, that has affected music, and I would be interested to know like what you think that thing is.
For me, I think the media plays a huge role in this. I think what is projected is what becomes the most important thing for minds which are still susceptible. You know, because if you are constantly, let's look at the advent of cable television. cable television came into India full force around the mid-90s. Right from that point onwards, what was served was inside your house. Before that, we used to, if we wanted to see a film, we would go to the theater and watch a film. If we wanted to listen to a concert, we would go and watch the concert. But here, everything is so easily accessible that you have everything on a remote. I think that has played a role in all of this, because television used to promote certain forms of art like classical music or folk music, but primarily it was in the national channels and Doordarshan, and it was never, as I said, it was never considered to be part of entertainment.
But why is it so damaging here in our countries and not so damaging elsewhere?
Because I think we're on some level, maybe you can endorse what I'm saying, or you can object to it also. Maybe it is because we still are, in a sense, a little too wannabe with the Western world. We feel that what is happening in the West is aspirational for us, and
May I say something?
yes, please.
That I think, particularly with traditional arts and let's say classical music, which we are studying, which I'm studying, I think there was this period where the whole idea of the Indian nation and pride in the heritage, in the cultural heritage of that nation was important to people. And so establishing, sort of festivals, institutions where music could be taught, I think that was important. Today, our idea of what makes the nation has changed. Today, we feel that, for example, the pride is in how many flyovers and malls do we have, or this whole idea of, what development means. And I think perhaps culture and art may have taken a back seat with policymakers over many decades. Since when, I don't recall, I've been trying very hard to find somewhere, today the net is used by the government and has been used for a while to put out policy. I have not found a culture policy ever articulated properly. And for example, the whole idea of including a vibrant, healthy arts education program in mainstream school education for
Absolutely,
children
absolutely.
has failed completely.
Yeah.
For years, we have discussed it at various levels. It has been recommended, recommendations have been accepted, and nothing has been done about it.
It's really interesting. A couple of things, both coming from what you're saying. One is almost like as soon as culture is lost, a kind of jingoism gets louder. So it's like people were proud about being India in their through their actions at a certain point. Now, like the Bharat Mata Ki Jai has never been louder. You can, and yet like it comes with an experience of cultural denuding. People know less about their culture than they ever knew before. And what I'm interested in is why this transition, given that even like my area of interest obviously is Sanskrit, and we haven't, for instance, found a successful way for traditional learning, which is full of richness of a kind, but the transition into modernity for something like Sanskrit hasn't been made. If you go to a school, the Sanskrit teacher will be a figure of fun. People will be made to feel that this is something déclassé. They'll gravitate towards the English literature teacher. Everything is set up in a modern context to kind of fill you with a certain sort of disdain for what is yours and to push you towards something that's a very thin, very shabby layer of modernity, So,
I went to the school a few months back, and there were lots of students, about 3,000 of them, and I asked them that, see, we do this series called the Live In series, which we promote in schools, try to get music to them. So I asked them, how many of you in the audience play the drums, the drum kit? So there were at least about 25, 30 of them. And just out of my own interest, I asked, how many of you play the tabla? There was one boy. So I called some of them up on stage and I said, so what is it that you find attractive about the drums? This is Indian society, and why is it that 30 of you are learning the drums, are interested in the drums, and only one is interested in the tabla? So some of them said, sir, the drums are very cool. That was the exact answer. So I think there has been a feeding of sorts into the minds of youngsters. Now, I don't know where that comes from. Maybe it's television, maybe it's media. Shubhaji, you can throw some light on that. But there has been some kind of feeding into the young minds that this is not very cool, this is hard, this is difficult, this is serious. And that is the fun area, that's the cool stuff. And that's Western, so the West is the way you should look for something cool and fun. And India is all about seriousness, and it's very difficult, and it's almost kind of passe in a sense, you know. आप तबला बजाते हो, अच्छा अच्छी बात है, चलो तबला बजाते हो, हम तो ड्रम बजाते हैं. So, you know, so what do you think about that?
No, I think one important point that I'd like to make about the arts in India is that, you know, arts were always, there was a large element of interdisciplinary learning in the arts. So there is a very famous anecdote which Kapila Vatsyayanji writes about in one of her books. And she describes how a dancer, a student of dance, went to learn from a guru, and the guru said, well, you need to go to the sculptor to learn about the human body. And when he went to the sculptor, he said, oh, but you need to know about the human anatomy, so you must, you know, understand the anatomy as well. So, you know, what I'm trying to say is that in the arts, it's important for the student to consider it an interdisciplinary study. And it was always so. For example, at one point of time, the Thumri singer was also a dancer. And of course, she never weighed as much as I do, so don't worry. I mean, so, you know, I mean, but I'm trying to say that the idea of the singer also being the dancer, also being a person who was well versed in Urdu Shairi, who could you know, whenever she wanted to or he wanted to, could intersperse a dadra or a thumri with doha and sher from various sources. I think this was an important part of the learning. And today our courses, especially our institutionalized courses for music, as well as our Guru Shishya Parampara, very often does not look at a singer's study of literature is almost non-existent. Whereas I feel in the study of Hindustani music, there has to be an emphasis laid on learning more than one language that is, I mean, whether it's Farsi or whether it is Sanskrit or whether it is Bangla or Marathi or Hindi. I think it is important for a musician to be rooted in literature, to be rooted, to be aware of painting, sculpture, and the arts, and to engage with that in that interdisciplinary way.
100%. What you're gesturing to is the kind of shattering of some kind of cultural wholeness. And that, I feel like it's affected every area of Indian cultural life. And it was around till just the other day. I mean, it's literally, and suddenly it went without anyone knowing what would come in its place, you know? But I'm loath to like make it feel like some kind of, you know, I'm not a great fan of state-powered cultural projects. I don't want culture to feel heavy. I feel like my engagement with culture is elevating. It's wonderful. It like fills me with, you know, it's not something that I do out of reverence and piety. And yet, like, you don't know what the journey back to some kind of renewal will be, because I don't know how the way goes. I don't know how a society responds when when a kind of cultural wholeness shatters in this way.
Aatish, there's something I've seen, because I fortunately or unfortunately I studied English literature, and because of that there were some wonderful things that happened in my life, and because of that I struggled a lot as well with you know, what Shubhaji was just saying is that you can have 2 or 3 different sides of learning, and very often you find that people don't actually have that, or they don't even aspire towards that. So that can be something which can create walls even amongst musicians. But coming back to what I was going to ask you is that do you feel that hang on, I was getting to something, I just lost the track of it. Yeah. Rabindranath Tagore was primarily regarded as a poet. There were so many other things he did. He was a painter, he was a visualizer, he was a writer, novelist, everything. Do you think that today, as a poet, there's a future, there can be a career for a person?
No, I mean it's become in some ways the most marginal of the arts. I mean there was
Yeah.
a time when the poet was next to the philosopher and the king. Like the poet was the person who channeled. He almost had a religious function in a society, and the poet now in our societies, but as well as the societies of Europe, of America, is marginal. And I very much fear the novelist is headed in his direction, you know. So, so no.
Unless he gets a couple of big film projects.
Well, exactly, and I mean that can change. I mean, sometimes right now you feel actually that if we talk about cultural vitality, that it's even the film has. I feel that real cultural vitality right now resides with television. It's it's when you travel the world, that 19th century novel role is filled by television. Everyone is watching these shows. They're at once long enough,
Exactly.
and then they're short enough, so people are so the movement of things like that is, I think that the changing of form in that way is something that probably like has happened historically. It's not something that's easy to control or to channel, but I think what I'm interested in is a certain like loss of confidence that I feel that Indians will face if they keep if this process of cultural denuding continues.
Yeah.
And you see it already. You feel you live in a country where people who know their things are made to feel small for knowing them.
Exactly.
People who know very little about the West but seem to possess a certain glamour about it are exalted. Like it's a strange cultural situation we're in. You know, linguistically even, we have millions of people who speak Indian languages as they always do, and yet the literature in all of these languages seems moribund. At the same time, nobody wants to write too well in English. If you write too much better than Chetan Bhagat, you're kind of in trouble.
Yeah.
So it's a very,
True.
I mean, it's like what kind of glass ceiling is this? You know, like how will we? I mean, to be in a situation where you're not expected to excel.
Aatish, I'm going to actually draw an interesting parallel. There's Mr. Anish Pradhan sitting here, who is my dear friend and colleague, Shubhaji's husband. But Anish bhai, I think we'll really